Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Broken Cisterns Podcast on Senetru Radio. I am Kimmy, and I'm here with Susannah.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us today on the Broken Cisterns Podcast. We are on episode 4, chapter 3 of the book, Broken Cisterns, and this chapter is titled The Awakening. So we'll get into that in a second, but wanted to remind you that you can go to our website, www.senetru.com, senetru.com. You get access to all of our books and get free PDFs for every single one of our books. You can also go through our website to get to Amazon, where you can purchase the book in a paperback version, any of our books in paperback version, or you can get a Kindle e-reader version through Amazon as well. Also, any other resources that we might have available through our website, blog posts, other podcast series, all that kind of good stuff. So before we get into this chapter, Susannah's going to give you an overview of what we went through last episode.
So last time we talked about a chapter called Broken Cisterns, and that's what the book is clearly named after. And what it is referring to is the Israelites consistently trying to fill themselves, and Yahweh is speaking through the prophet Jeremiah saying, you guys can't do this. I'm the only source of living water, and you keep trying to fill your broken vessels, and you can't hold water because you're not authorized basically to do this. If nobody else can do this except for me. So it was referring to my personal, we'll call it a journey, but it was a frenzy. We'll call it a frenzy of trying to fill myself, trying to fix myself with method after method after method of all these different things. That is what you do when you're in the kind of self-help world or personal growth world. Book after method after healer, after coach, after pulling cards and ceremonies and all these different things, trying to fix yourself when Yahweh is the only source of healing. So that's what the chapter was about. We worked our way up to just the short time right before Yahweh literally ripped the blindfold off of us and was like, we're done doing all of this now, and you're going to come and work for me now. So that's where we're at today. Just the short period of time right before the actual, I call it an awakening, where we were woken up and pulled out of our deception. We're going to start with the scripture that's at the beginning of this chapter, Hebrews 4:12. For the Logos of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And we know that Logos, not word, Logos of God means his will and intent. So his will and intent is searching and discerning the thoughts and intents of our hearts.
And that verse goes on to say that no creature is hidden from his sight. So
Right.
The common church view is that this is talking about the Bible, which is not even possible based on the description of it. But
No.
It's talking about something obviously living, something powerful, Yahweh's will and intent, which searches the innermost parts of our being. And it says no creature is hidden from his sight, referring back to the Logos itself.
Mm-hmm. So growing up in the institution, and okay, I have talked about this, but neither of us understood what Israel was. And I don't know, maybe we talked about this a few weeks ago, but I'm going to just touch on it again really quick. Israel, referring to God's chosen people, is not referring to a geopolitical nation, a place on a map. It's not referring to a country. Israel is, the definition of Israel is someone who wrestles with God and prevails, basically is what it means. When Jacob wrestled with the divine messenger, he was renamed Israel, which to a Hebrew in those days, being renamed something actually changed your identity, like who you were. The word Jacob at the time meant heel grabber, and it meant that he acquired things by trickery. That's what his name meant. Which he did. And his name was changed because he wrestled with this divine messenger, and he wrestled until he won, basically. and he wasn't going to let go until God blessed him.
That was the win, too.
That was the
blessing.
Yes, was the blessing, where his name was changed, but the word means one who wrestled and won't let go. And leading up to this awakening time, we talked about this last week, I think, where about 6 months prior to when Yahweh actually ripped the blindfold off of us, we both heard from him. Same weekend, Kenny had a very real encounter with Yahweh and then kind of had continual encounters with him leading up to this time. And I was also told that there was something happening and I was going to be helping. So we were both made aware that something was coming. And Kenny was, when I was just reading about this the other day, about this kind of definition of Israel, I was thinking like this was Kenny. Kenny was pursuing Yahweh. And at the time, I don't think he was really thinking Yahweh, right? It was more just like,
God.
Like, who are you, God? He was like, who are you? Show yourself to me. I want to know who you are, no matter what it costs, no matter what it takes. And he was like, I will do whatever you ask because I want to know who you are so badly. And that just made me think of like, that's what the definition of Israel is one who wrestles with God.
So God's people then are, because Israel is his chosen people. It's not, as you mentioned, it's not a geopolitical place. It's not a country on a map. But Jacob was renamed Israel before there was ever a border around a piece of land called Israel.
Right.
And so Jacob's name was given to him as the first example of Israel. You are what my people are made of. They're made of this type that seeks me out to find me. Mm-hmm. So from Abraham's seed comes the nation of Israel, the people who would do this. So all the people basically that are God's chosen people are those who seek out earnestly Yahweh and do so until he reveals himself.
Right. To them. It was a spiritual seed. Abraham's seed is a spiritual seed. It's not his descendants, like physical descendants with his same DNA. Right. It's anyone who surrenders to Yahweh, like Abraham did, like Isaac and Jacob, and then the few people who have surrendered all the way since then, Moses, David, those people. So anyways, Kenny was seeking. And I was very intimidated by this because I sensed that something big was happening, but I didn't want my comfort in my life to be disrupted. And so I was resisting it. And I also mentioned in the last episode that I was being tormented with this spirit. I call it a tormenting spirit. I'm not sure what else to call it, but it was something that was consistently causing anxiety and intrusive thoughts and telling me to leave Kenny. And it was causing a lot of fear. My whole life was kind of wrapped up in fear around that time because A, I knew something big was happening, and B, this thing was telling me to leave Kenny, and it was causing just a lot of physical anxiety in my body. I felt it in my chest. I felt it in my throat. It was awful. So leading up to this time of this awakening, when Yahweh really showed us that we're switching directions. So I'm going to read the beginning of this chapter because I just wrote it out in a funny way. The divine interruption arrived like a demolition. I think most people think of an awakening as an event where they all of a sudden achieve a state of enlightenment and they have arrived in a place where everything makes sense and they feel a sense of peace. At least I thought that, and this was not that. So coming from the New Age mentality, an awakening is when you're in this, I think it's like this place of floaty peace and you feel like you've arrived and things feel like they make sense. And this did not happen that way. And so I call it the divine interruption, but it was a demolition.
So as Susannah mentioned, we're leading up to this point. Like 6 months before, we both hear God tell us separately that something is coming and I'm going to use you in some way, right? So that's going on. There's been numerous, I think we mentioned this last time, there's been numerous interactions that I've had with Yahweh and over that 6 month period leading up to January of 2025, where the awakening event occurs. So we're heading towards January 2025, and Yahweh is clear. Something is coming, and there's multiple occasions where this has occurred. Susannah's got the tormenting spirit going on, which is not fun. And tormenting is a good way to explain it. But we're leading up to this point in time, and I was really seeking the truth. I didn't know what that really meant. I was not seeking Jesus as God. I was seeking God. I was not seeking many gods. I was not seeking New Age God. I was seeking God, the God that I understood to be God, who would be, I guess you could say he's the Father, right? It wasn't, some other God. So I was seeking God, and I wanted to truly know who he was. I didn't care what that meant for me. I was willing to accept whatever that meant. If that meant that I got up and walked away, I said it. I said that out loud. I said it, and it freaked Susannah out.
Yeah, I didn't like that. It's like, no, you can't quit your job.
But I just knew, guttural feeling, that the only way for the things that I saw as massive attitudes within society, the only way for those things to be healed, including for them within our own family, the only way for those things to be healed was through the intervention of a God who was the constructor of the ordered reality. He was the one who had to come in and fix what we as mankind had broken. And I knew that to be true. What happened in January of 2025 was not, I didn't have an expectation, nor did I wake up on January 21st, which is the day that it happened. I didn't wake up on that day, and Susannah didn't wake up on that day and say, I think it's going to happen today. We did not have any idea that something was going to happen. We did not know that our lives were going to be turned upside down. But what was clear was on January 21st of 2025, everything changed in an instant. And I mentioned last time I had written a resignation letter that Yahweh had told me to write a year before. I had written it. It was all lined up and ready to go. And on that date, he said, it's time to pull it out and send it. And so I did. And that was the Kickstarter for what happened over that 24-hour period. And then over that next 24 hours, I would say, the best way to describe it is we were completely unveiled. The lies that we were living in, whether it was, New Age or anything, it was anything, but the New Age construct that we had built our lives around crumbled in an instant. It was like, that's not real. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't like I need to go research this. It was just, that's not real. And it was immediately revealed. And God said to us, you work for me now. And so it's hard to kind of pull it all together into what happened in an instant, because in an instant, there's probably a million things that occurred in our heads and our hearts that said, this is all changing right now. And we knew it, and it was rapid. It was very, very rapid. So that happened really, really quickly at that moment in time. But I do the lead-up story on this because I think it's really important, because I committed to it. Mm-hmm. I committed to it before we got to January 21st. And I didn't know what I committed to, but when it was all brought in front of us, that's what it was. That's what I was committing to. I had said, it doesn't matter what it means for me. I'm willing to do it. And Yahweh heard that and moved forward.
So like Kenny said, everything kind of shifted in an instant, but within 24 hours, we left our home because we lived in the Columbia Gorge at the time. We left our home and we drove to Bend, where we are now. We drove to Kenny's parents' house in Bend just to try to clear our heads. I did not know what was going on. I don't think Kenny totally knew what was going on at the time.
Not completely.
We didn't totally know what was going on.
I knew it was God, and I think I said so much. And I said I think I told Susannah, things are going to change. We need to be ready for some relationship changes in particular. I think I knew was going to happen right away.
Yeah. So we drove to Bend. We got to Kenny's parents' house. And over some hours, maybe a couple days, the dust started to settle a bit. And Kenny discerned, this is God. And we didn't call him Yahweh at that point. We didn't quite understand that this has been an evolving process here over a year and a half to understand who he really is. But at the time, I was associating this with the God of the church that I had gone to, and I did not like that at all. I was very uncomfortable with this fact. And I knew that things could never go back to how they were because it was instantly revealed that all of that was a lie. Like there was no question at all that it was all a lie. But I didn't know, like, do we have to go to church now? Like, I didn't understand, like, what the heck was happening. And so, like I said, the dust kind of settled over a few days, and obviously over weeks and months, it settled more and more and more. But the first few days, the first week after this whole thing happened, were very uncomfortable for me. I had this lump in my throat that would not go away because I was just like, what is happening? I had rejected all of this. I didn't want anything to do with it. And the one thing that was the kind of the biggest kind of sign in all of this was a couple of days I realized if this was God, I could ask him to take this tormenting spirit away from me. I remember this serious relief at feeling like I could ask someone instead of what's kind of this new age spirituality, this self-help stuff it's all self-centered. It's all you're your own healer. Everything you have is inside of you. You are the one who creates your reality. And it never even occurred to me that I could ask God to take this from me. And I was not totally convinced at the time that he was real or what was happening, but I didn't have anything to lose. So I asked him to take it from me, and it was gone. Within a few hours, the heaviness in my chest was gone. The anxiety, the torment that was coming from it was totally gone, and it has never come back. And I know that he did that at that time to show me that he was real, even though I was so confused. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't believe him at all. I didn't believe there was a God because I had rejected it all. But something was happening, and I know that he showed up in that moment to show me, like, hey, I'm real and you can trust me.
So I think it's kind of funny to look at both of our experiences in this, because I never at any point was like, time to go to church again. I'd never thought that. And I think in the time since that date, we went to church one time and I was just kind of like, we got to check this out to see what's going on there kind of deal. But I never felt like I was supposed to return to an institution. I think I mentioned this before, but even when I got kicked out of Bible college for questioning the very belief systems that we're writing about today, I never blamed God for that removal from school. And now that I look back on it, I understand that God was protecting me for sure. But I didn't blame him. It was kind of like one of those things where it was like, you're not responsible for your followers type of deal. Like I didn't blame him for it. So it's kind of interesting that Susannah had this perspective. It is like, I think that fear was coming in from the enemy trying to say, this is what you're doing kind of deal. And it couldn't be furthest from the truth. I do know that like the coming weeks, the days and weeks that followed this awakening event, there was massive exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So unveiling of who we really were. And again, I committed to it, and then it happened. And then what it required of us, and from my perspective, what it required of me was full-blown exposure of everything false that was in me. Mm-hmm. And God literally told me there's going to be nothing but truth from you. And everything began to become exposed like one thing at a time. And it happened for months, night after night after night, one thing after the other. And I owned it in the way that Yahweh directed me to own it. So he was directing me through his voice to own it in the way I had to own it. And I recently been reading the story of the Israelites at Mount Sinai and what happened there, because I think what happened there is very different than what we have been taught. We've kind of been taught, the Israelites, God's people, they set up this system, right? And we're working on a book right now called The Kingdom of Priests that's going to go into what actually occurred in this system establishment. But I look at that because in Exodus, before the Ten Commandments are ever written on a tablet, Yahweh, through Moses, he basically says to the Israelites, follow my voice, obey my commands, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And the Israelites respond, and they say, we will do all that God says. And God says, basically, great. I mean, it doesn't say that, but this is, again, before the 10 Commandments are written. That is the covenant. Follow my voice and obey my commands. I will be your God, and you will be my people. And they say, we will do all that the Lord has commanded. And God says, okay, Moses, gather the Israelites together, and we're going to meet. And so they all get together on Mount Sinai, and Yahweh speaks to them in what is called the 10 words, by the way. The 10 Commandments is not the actual name of what God delivers to them. It's called the 10 words. And the word for words is davar, which is similar, the same meaning as the word logos, which is Yahweh's will and intent. So when God delivers the 10 Commandments or the 10 words, his will and intent, to the Israelites, he is revealing themselves to them. He is telling them what he knows about them. And he is exposing all the things that currently exist within them that cannot exist if they want to be in his presence. He's showing them, and he's offering to remove it. So that is a huge piece of that story that is not understood. And it's important to understand that, because what happens next is the Israelites decline the covenant offer. And I don't think that is understood at all. So he reveals to them who they are. He shows them that he sees them. He sees the things that they're doing. Adultery, they're not obeying their parents, they're worshiping false gods, they're doing all these things. The 10 words or the 10 Commandments are the evidence of them not following the voice of God. It's the evidence against them. That's why they're placed into the Ark of the Testimony, or the covenant. This is a box that holds the testimony against the Israelites. So after he writes it. But he delivers that to them and exposes them, and their response to that is, they say to Moses, Moses, we want you to talk to God for us. We don't want to talk to him. We don't want to hear his voice. That's what they're saying. They're saying, we don't want to hear his voice directly. We want you to talk to God yourself.
Lest we die.
Lest we die. So the lest we die part is they know that the removal of all that is within them can feel like death.
Sure does.
They know that it's going to mean that they have to let go of everything that they have built themselves around. Mm-hmm. And I'm not touting myself, because I didn't know what I was getting into necessarily, but I told Yahweh, I'm committed to this. And when the things came, I knew I had to let them go, and it hurt. I mean, it still hurts. Looking back, it's still all that stuff that had to go, that had to be purged. And I'm not talking about like blatant evil stuff or anything like that. I'm just talking about things that had taken the place of God, whether it was something we had in our home, to our house itself, to the things we liked to do, to our friendships and relationships. He had to be first before anything else. And that is something that the Israelites felt when Yahweh revealed themselves to them. When he revealed that, they felt that, and they didn't want it. And so they declined the offer of the covenant. Now, the author of Hebrews in Hebrews 8 and 9 says, because finding fault with them, he says, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says the Lord. I don't think people know that the Israelites declined the first covenant, the old covenant. They said they don't want it. They don't want to follow the voice of Yahweh directly. They don't want to hear from him directly. He had offered to them to become a kingdom of priests. Everybody would go to Yahweh themselves, one-on-one, and have a relationship with him where he would speak to them and they would follow his voice. They declined that, and they set up a system. They established a system out of their own will not out of the will of Yahweh. He didn't want that system. That system is what followed after they refused the covenant. And I think that's really important to understand. And I'm tying that back to the fact that I had said, and Susannah by default,
Yes.
being alongside with me, had said, we'll do whatever it takes. And when it came down to going through that, the Logos of God searching the heart and mind and revealing everything that was in there, I knew it all had to go, because if I wanted him, I couldn't have all that.
Mm-hmm. It's basically the stripping of everything that you have built yourself to be. The stripping of the identity you've created. For me, I had created this persona and had gone so far as to be this spiritual mentor type of person that I knew was false, but it felt sort of right at the time. But it was like this self-built thing, and I had to let go of that. And Kenny had to let go of all of his stuff. And it felt like death.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Israelites were referring to, is they could feel this, lest we die. I don't know if they actually thought they were going to die or if it felt like they were going to die, but I can vouch for the fact that it does feel like you're dying.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the feelings, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about that before, and Susannah, I know your experience with this is pretty, it's helpful.
It's hefty.
It's hefty and helpful, but we as people, we use feelings as such an indicator of, I'll say, truth. We use it as an indicator of truth when it has no root in truth. And the world today asks a lot of the time, how does it make you feel? How do you feel about that? And I'll tell you what, when going through this process, if the indicator of whether I move forward or not was how I felt, I wouldn't be here today.
No.
And it's going to feel like death. It has felt like death at times. It felt like the insides of me are being ripped in two different places, like shredded apart, because part of it, a good part of it, cannot stay.
Right.
While Yahweh makes his residence in me as his temple.
Yeah. I had an impactful experience that I read about in this chapter. Shortly after we left our home, we came to Bend, we rented a house. We never went back to our old house except for to get our stuff. But I had gone back a couple of weeks after we came here, and a friend happened to be driving by, and she pulled over and talked to me, and she was obviously rattled at how quickly everything had changed. We left quickly. We didn't come back. Like it was a jarring experience. And she asked me how things were and what was happening. And really the only thing I knew at that point is that we were being asked to stand in the truth and speak the truth. And I told her that, and that's really all I knew at that point in time. I really still didn't really know what was going on. Things were still settling. And her response to me was, "And this feels good to you?" Like she couldn't believe that that would feel good. And at the time, I said yes, because I wasn't falling apart at that moment in time. But I realized later, being in the truth doesn't feel good always. And as we have gone through this process, like the spiritual opposition is really, really heavy. And that also really doesn't feel good. And Kenny has to remind me a lot because I get really caught up in my feelings. And then kind of going back to this new age self-help personal growth thing, everything is gauged on how you feel. And it's actually pretty crazy how much stock and how much importance is put on that, because it really is not a measure of truth in any way. The only thing it is like how you happen to be feeling at that moment. And again, for me, Kenny does remind me a lot how things can shift from day to day, hour to hour, moment to moment in how you feel. And I know we've mentioned this over and over again. We'll continue to mention this, how strong the spiritual realm is and how much they affect us. Like, I mean, this is not just like a mood shifting from here and there. This is spiritual oppression coming in at any given time. And it very much affects how you feel. And so that's one thing that I have learned. I still struggle with it constantly, is not getting so wrapped up in how I feel, because I mean, I honestly don't feel super great a lot of the time, because I am being persuaded by the spiritual realm to stop doing what we're doing. Like, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get us to stop. And it's really uncomfortable. It causes very uncomfortable feelings in my body. They affect our thoughts, and they are oppressive in a lot of ways, and that doesn't feel good, but it doesn't have an indicator of the truth. It's not an indicator of the truth.
Yeah, and the enemy plays with feelings. That's one of his main stopping ground, is the feelings of people. So a spirit can come in and can make you feel a certain way, and then if it's able to attribute that to belief or truth or whatever, then it's able to manipulate you. So the enemy is able to manipulate you through feelings. And that's not safe. It's not a safe place to be. The only place that you can be that is reliable is to be fully surrendered to Yahweh and allow him to reveal what is true to you. Not Jesus as God, that doesn't work. Not New Age, that doesn't work. Not rooted in feelings, that doesn't work. Fully surrender to Yahweh, even if it does not feel good. And it's not going to feel good when you live in a world that has succumbed to the rule of self. The rule of self is filled with lies that say you are the one who's in charge of everything, right? The rule of self is filled with lies, and when you are standing out on a ledge by yourself without anyone to, or not many, to support or back the truth, then it doesn't feel good. It just doesn't. And Jesus never promised that we would feel good. He promised that we would have Yahweh if we surrendered to Yahweh like he did. That's what he promised us. He promised that we are not of this world. Basically, our kingdom is of another world, and that place is where we actually belong. And we don't belong in this place. And when you stand on the tree, you're going to run into feelings being a problem. I'm not saying you feel like crap all the time. That's not what we're saying.
Not all the time.
We're saying that you will confront, like Susannah said, you'll confront a spiritual battle that is all geared around feelings.
Yeah.
So the only indicator of what is true is what is true. And it can only be found through Yahweh. That's the only way. It's not found in an institution, any institutional church. It's not found in anything that says that Jesus is God, because that right there is not truth. It's not found in those things. The only way is through surrender to Yahweh. It does not require immediate or urgent response from you. It does not utilize feelings of anxiety or fear to push you to decide. It does not use any of those things. The truth is a rock that you stand on. It doesn't need you to defend it. Yahweh does not need you to defend his truth. He defends it. He defends it for you. You can lean on it and allow him to hold you up.
I'm going to read another little excerpt out of this chapter. So the following months, following the event of the blindfold being ripped off, the following months, which I outline in later chapters, were a refiner's fire. And we alluded to that just a little bit. They were deeply uncomfortable, which is the thing I was most afraid of. But he has sustained us, and he still is. There is nothing about this awakening that has been easy or light or has felt like a rival. The truth is very, very confronting, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that makes it even more confronting. The things that used to comfort no longer do, and the only thing that feels stable is the truth of who God really is. Not the God I was taught about in the church growing up, who is vastly different than Yahweh, the one true God. and definitely not the universe, who I sort of had some kind of allegiance to, but I also deep inside knew that that was a lie. The one true God is nothing like what either of them sold me, and the only way to know this is to surrender first, and then he teaches you. Not the other way around, which would be the easier option. But we've talked about that a lot in our podcast, is that you surrender first and then he teaches you. You don't get to build up a lot of information to make an educated decision first. You surrender first, and then he shows you the way, how it has happened.
Yeah. And when I say I'm going to God and talking to him, I did not read a book. There was no book involved. I was just taking the time and asking him to show himself to me. Mm-hmm. Because I honestly, Susannah wrote about this in the book, I was struggling. Not struggling with like my trauma or anything like that. I was struggling with what I saw in the world. Yeah. And I could not, working in the business that I worked in homeless services and social services, I was front and center. But if you don't drive down the street and look around and say, this is not the way it's supposed to be, I don't know what you're looking at.
Right. But
I was struggling with what I was seeing outside, and I believed deep down inside that there was another way. Mm-hmm. And that way involved God fixing it all, because man can do nothing. No politician, no new software program, no new computer system, no policy will do anything. It will only make it worse, because it is just man ruling self with self. Yeah. The only thing that can fix it is a fully surrendered people to a holy God who can repair and restore what we screwed up.
I said this in the book too, is that I knew Kenny was struggling. I watched him struggle for years and years. And again, not with himself. Like, he wasn't like me. I was struggling with myself, trying to figure out all my own stuff. I watched him struggle with what was going on in the world, and I was so consumed with myself that I couldn't, like, I watched it, but I couldn't do anything about it. Like, I didn't want to disrupt my own comfort and my own stuff enough to really pry into it too much, because I knew it would cause discomfort, which is what it did cause. And there wasn't anything I could have done on the front end anyways. Yahweh had to do it all in his time, and that's what has happened. But I watched him struggling with this because he was up so close and personal to the dysfunction. And we mentioned this, I think, a couple episodes ago, like, when people don't have homes, that is like our base issue.
It's your place of rest. I mean, yeah. It's the place of rest. It's a place that you're supposed to be taken care of. Right. And when you don't have the place that you're supposed to be taken care of even available to you, there is something that is detrimental to all of society about that.
So just to wrap all of this up in this little section of the book, we were awakened and we surrendered together. There wasn't another path. Like, it was very clear that we could not go back to our old life. We didn't know the way forward, but we did know that surrender was the only way forward. And so we did that. It's easy to look back and say that's what was going on at the time. And during the whole thing, it felt messy. It was messy, and
it's not like something you have practice at doing.
No.
If you did, you wouldn't be going through it again, right?
No.
So we had to surrender to Yahweh so that he could take care of the rest.
Right. And he started to teach us, and it was like drinking out of a fire hose.
It still is.
It still
is, and it happens. It's been happening every day since January 21st of 2025.
Yeah, so it's been about 18 months now, and the learning hasn't stopped, and it's been fascinating. And it's been challenging, and living in the truth is hard, but we couldn't go back to not living in the truth. That's not an option.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about, like, when we say living in the truth, it's like, it's living in who Yahweh is. And that doesn't mean we know everything. That doesn't mean we know all truth, every aspect of everything that is truth. We know who is the truth and where all truth comes from.
Right.
And so things get revealed, and we're learning stuff right now about things that God did a long time ago that
affect now.
That affect now that I could have said I thought was completely different before. And being open to the truth being different than what you think it is essential. If you're not, you're not surrendered to him.
That's true. You can't come in with some idea, which I think both of us had been out of the institution for so long, which was probably the reason that we were out of it for so long, that we didn't have solidified things that we held on to.
Like it's like a baseline theology that people have, or a baseline belief structure. When you have a baseline belief structure, you're always pulling back to that baseline, and it doesn't leave you the ability to listen to who Yahweh really is from him.
Right.
It requires that you adhere to a series of textual assertions that come from a religious leader or from what you believe Scripture says, rather than allowing Yahweh to teach you himself. That's why Jesus says to the Pharisees and Sadducees, you search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have life, but you do not come to me, because they were not willing to surrender to Yahweh. They just read the Scriptures and said, we know who he is based off of what we read.
Yeah. And they were really, really wrong.
Very wrong.
Really, really wrong.
And they couldn't even see it, even with Jesus sitting right in front of them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I meant by that, is like we're open to who he says he is and who he shows us he is, instead of having some preconceived beliefs going into it, which I think, yeah, like I said, is essential. So next episode, we are going to talk about chapter 4, which is called the New Covenant. And this is, again, another thing that neither of us learned about in our 30 years of being in the institution. And now it's clear that they don't understand it or live by it either, which is why they never talked about it, because it requires no church, no mediator of any kind.
Which actually doesn't allow them.
Yeah, it doesn't allow someone else to teach you, because the New Covenant is that Yahweh will teach you. He will write his laws on your heart and mind and guide and direct you from the inside. So we're going to talk about that next time. And thank you for joining us for this one.
Yeah, don't forget to go to our website, senetru.com. All the info's in the show notes. Get our books through there, free PDFs of all of our books. Yeah, we hope you'll join us next time as we talk about the New Covenant on the Broken Cisterns Podcast.
Bye.
Bye.